The Mother's Secret Diary. Chapter 1. The Classroom Where Spring Lingered. The air of early spring was still cool. But undeniably, the scent of the season was mixed in. Sunlight pouring through the classroom window, diffused with a peculiar softness. And motes of dust rotated slowly within its beam. Jung-ae stood at the blackboard, chalk in hand. Writing out a poem, line by line, she addressed her students. A single line written with sincerity remains long. Sincerity outlasts time, you see. She knew better than anyone that those words were directed at herself. That day marked the arrival of a new teacher. The school was in a small rural town in Jeonnam, and most of the faculty were young women in their late 20s or early 30s. But the new man was different. He wore clothes that resembled a modified gray military uniform. He had neatly groomed hair and broad, strong shoulders. Someone whispered, "They say he was temporarily transferred from the military. Posted here for recuperation after an injury during service." His name was Do-yeon. When their eyes first met, Jung-ae avoided his gaze. Do-yeon's eyes held an unfamiliar intensity. They weren't frightening, but they were eyes she couldn't easily meet. As he moved among the students, examining the quotes on the board, his presence seemed strangely out of place. A subtle tension was created by the collision of a soldier's stiffness and a teacher's gentle demeanor within one man. That afternoon, he quietly called Jung-ae over near the faculty room door. "Korean teacher, may I see the school song's sheet music?" His tone was low and steady. The conversation that began that way continued more frequently than she expected. They read the students' poems together, fixed an old radio, and sometimes drank coffee beneath the trees in the schoolyard. He never wasted a word, and Jung-ae found comfort in the silence of his consideration. Do-yeon explained he had been temporarily assigned after a shoulder injury during his military service. "I must return soon. I am simply fortunate to smell the classroom air, even for a short time." At his words, Jung-ae offered a faint smile. "The students will like you. They must think a soldier teacher is quite cool. More likely, they find me terrifying." His laugh was brief, yet profound. Time flowed slowly, but their hearts moved much faster. She often watched him from a distance, reading a book under the shade of the school's front tree. He was reading a poetry collection. His expression was too serene for a man in the military. From that day on, Jung-ae always kept the same book out after class. A volume of Yun Dong-ju's poems. She would search for a line that he might like. An unnamed feeling began to grow. That spring, there was a sports day. The students ran across the dirt field, and the sky was dazzlingly clear. Do-yeon held a camera, taking pictures of the students. When Jung-ae handed him water, he took the cup with a sweat-dampened hand. Their fingertips brushed. That minuscule touch lingered long. She spent the entire day recalling that sensation, and lay awake late into the night. A few days later, Do-yeon was waiting for her outside the faculty room door. "My orders to return to the base have been issued for tomorrow." She lost her voice. "Will you be able to come back?" He looked into Jung-ae's eyes for a moment. "I don't know, but I wish to return." That night, beneath the apricot tree behind the school, they sat in silence. The spring wind was cold, and the moonlight faintly illuminated the dirt path. He took her hand. She said nothing. Every time her fingertip trembled, the wind seemed to halt. You are. He stopped speaking. Jung-ae lifted her gaze. In his eyes was a carefully concealed resolve. When I return, may I come back to you? She nodded. I will wait. That night, they forgot the sounds of the world, feeling only each other's breath. It was the first and the last time. A few days later, Do-yeon left. All he left behind was a short note. I will return someday. Until then, please be happy. Jung-ae placed the note inside her diary and opened that page every day. But no letters came. The seasons changed, and summer arrived. Her body was subtly beginning to change. At first, she thought it was just a cold. But after a month, and then another, Jung-ae finally understood. His trace remained. She would cradle her belly with both hands at night, whispering, "It's all right, it's all right. You have your mother." Tears flowed. She sat at her desk, looking out the window. The cherry blossoms had fallen completely, replaced by abundant green leaves. That summer, Jung-ae's world would never return to what it was before. Chapter 2. The Summer Shadow. Marriage and the Onset of Silence. It was the week the monsoon began. The boundary between day and night was blurred. Rain poured down, only to stop, repeating the cycle several times a day. Small puddles dotted the dirt path of the schoolyard. The blurred sky was inverted within each pool. Jung-ae avoided the water, entering the faculty room. Hesitating near the umbrella stand, she took off her rubber boots. She set down her bag, preparing for the first class, as always. Just then, a shadow slowly fell across the faculty room door. Teacher Jung, Korean language. The principal's voice was low and placid, as usual. Though it seemed it would be muffled by the rain, it was not. Jung-ae lifted her head. The principal briefly examined her face. Then silently held out a piece of paper. It was the class assignment sheet for the next semester. She habitually accepted the paper, but felt his gaze linger. Not on the sheet, but on the back of her hand. That gaze held something unconfirmed, yet already known. Come to the principal's office for a moment. He added nothing more. The rain outside grew heavier. The principal's office window was large, and rain streaks slanted across the glass. Through the downpour, the old Zelkova tree at the edge of the schoolyard swayed indistinctly. The principal stood near the window. With his hands clasped behind his back, he remained silent for a long time. Do-yeon has left. He opened the conversation. Jung-ae's heart momentarily flinched. Just hearing the name felt like a sealed drawer had suddenly sprung open. Yes. Do you think he can return? The question was not a request for an answer, but a stone-like determination to confirm reality. Jung-ae glanced at the window. I don't know. The principal paused, nodded slightly, and then asked very carefully, Is your body all right? The question was honest. It was neither probing nor accusatory, nor exaggerated with pity. It was the voice of a man confirming a fact, asking if he could bear the full weight of that fact alongside her. It was then that Jung-ae felt a thin wall surrounding her disappear. I tried to manage it alone. It's difficult alone. The principal's voice softened slightly. There are some burdens a teacher shouldn't have to bear alone. There are also matters this era does not permit. He moved to his desk and took out a large envelope. Inside the envelope were a small memo. a resident registration form, and a marriage registration document. Jung-ae felt a strange sense of composure rather than surprise. The manner in which life often overwhelms us is without prior notice. Arriving first as forms, papers, seals, entries, dates. "I must ask this of you." The principal looked up. "I will take responsibility." In his stead, he had been the one quietly observing the currents inside and outside the school for a long time. Rumors among students. A stray word heard in the faculty room, tears quickly hidden at the end of the corridor. Jung-ae did not know when she had been discovered. She only now admitted that someone had been gently watching. From that day on, Jung-ae's daily life changed its rhythm. When she woke up in the morning, a slight nausea came over her, like seasickness, and her breath became short climbing the stairs. When children lined up to receive their report cards, she often had to hold the lectern for support. Tears threatened to fall at the slightest increase in light intensity. The children were quick to notice. Someone carefully offered her water, and someone else wiped the blackboard for her. Those small acts of kindness were the safest bridges of her day. The principal appeared outwardly unchanged. He remained concise in meetings and perfectly dignified before parents. Yet, the air around Jung-ae subtly shifted. She was assigned to a lower-floor classroom, and as lunchtime approached, an extra serving tray arrived near the faculty room. This was leftover, the nutritionist would say. But her eyes clearly held the light of a favor requested. One day, the principal's office door opened slightly, and a cup of herbal tea appeared. It was unlabeled, with the distinct scent of ginger syrup. "It's good for warming your stomach," the principal said. His words were less explanation and more commitment. On a certain Saturday, when the monsoon rains began in earnest, the principal handed Jung-ae 2 wedding invitations. One was addressed with her name, the other was a notice for the school staff. The wedding was decided to be small and quiet, attended only by the school's elders and a few family members. The date was set in the heart of the monsoon season. The heavier the rain, the fewer the guests. The fewer the misunderstandings, the fewer the wounds. The principal had already calculated that equation. On the morning of the wedding, the rain fell like fine thread. The sky felt like it had been cracked open. The venue was a small church in the town. Rain flowed down the alleys, and the wooden steps outside the church were wet and slippery. Jung-ae wore an ivory dress. Her belly was not yet visible, but she knew. She adjusted the dress's waistline by an inch. Her face in the mirror was pale, yet her eyes seemed clearer. White wild chrysanthemums filled the church. They were not grand, but their scent was deep. The pastor's prayer was short and precise, and the principal stood firm throughout the ceremony. A few teachers carrying congratulatory envelopes avoided eye contact. Someone muttered, "At least it's a blessing," like a sigh. That sentiment held layers of interpretation. A blessing for whom, and for what? As the ceremony concluded, the principal took Jung-ae's hand. The grasp was firm like a handshake, yet not long like a lover's. His touch conveyed less of a promise to stand in front than a quiet resolution to push from behind. Stepping out of the church entrance, the rain intensified. The scent of wild chrysanthemums mixed with wet wood stung her nostrils. Jung-ae closed her eyes, then opened them. In that brief moment, it felt as though she quietly folded a photograph in her mind. and placed it at the very back of her diary. The man in that photograph was smiling. Dust from the chalk and sunlight settling on him. The marriage registration was processed the following Monday. The documents were simple, the procedure quick. A young civil servant at the local office glanced over the forms and asked questions. First marriage or remarriage? First marriage. Spouse also first marriage? Yes. The questions were indifferent, and perhaps because of their indifference, they felt kind. The sound of the stamp hitting the paper alternated with the cheerful ticking of the office clock. Someone across the counter repeated the action of tearing a numbered ticket, folding it, and unfolding it again. These sounds were commonplace, and therefore reassuring. Life, always changing its course quietly among the lives of others. That evening, the principal handed her the keys to their new rental home. It was a semi-basement apartment in a small, two-story house, slightly outside the city center. The windows were low, and the sound of rainwater seemed louder. The apartment had 2 rooms, and the kitchen was small but clean. The wallpaper was freshly changed to a pale cream color. Jung-ae stood in the middle of the empty room and gently exhaled. Even in the humid air, she could smell the change in her life's location. "I put the contract in your name, teacher," the principal said. Jung-ae looked at him, surprised. "If it's in your name, it looks better to the school staff. No one will question it. What we must hide is not the lie, but the wound." His was a rare, long sentence. On their first night in the new house, Jung-ae couldn't sleep. She counted the raindrops hitting the window ledge until she gave up counting. She got up in the middle of the night and went to the kitchen. She drank half a glass of water and slowly walked into the living room. Unpacked boxes lined the wall. She carefully opened one of them. Inside were textbooks, a handkerchief, old photographs, and a diary wrapped in red cloth. She stared at the diary for a moment, then slowly closed the box. No writing today. Today is not a day for recording, nor for tidying. Today is simply a day for enduring. The summer deepened. Supplementary classes began at school, and Jung-ae's schedule was restricted to mornings. Her nausea intensified as the day wore on. When children lined up for their grades, she often leaned on the lectern to steady herself. The light entering her eyes threatened to spill tears. The children were observant. Someone cautiously offered her water, and someone else wiped the blackboard for her. Those small acts of kindness were the safest bridges of her day. The principal maintained an unobtrusive distance, yet he protected her. Early in the semester's faculty meeting, he suggested simplifying events that required long-standing periods. "We must consider the student's health." No one could find a good reason to oppose him. The sports day was reduced to a half-day morning event, and night self-study was cut down to 2 days a week. Small packets of medication sometimes appeared on her desk drawer. Pulled from his pocket. "It's an antacid. It will calm your stomach." He concealed the prescription's name. He was a man who had long known that consideration sometimes had to operate anonymously. Once, a parent raised their voice in the corridor outside the faculty room. "Who do you think you're entrusting our children to? We've all heard the rumors. Rumors always attack the weakest point first." The principal opened the door and led the parent into a separate office. The door closed. It remained closed for a long time. When the door finally opened, the parent's face was slick with cold sweat. "I apologize," they said. Briefly and softly, yet with certainty, before leaving. After that, the parent bowed lightly whenever they saw the principal. Bowing the head might be compelled. But raising it again is always one's own choice. The baby's quickening, the first fetal movements, happened one evening. As the night self-study class was ending, the faculty room lights were dimming. Jung-ae sat at her seat, organizing her notes. Suddenly, a gentle ripple spread within her belly. At first, she thought it was gas. But she soon realized it was a movement from the inside reaching out. She placed both hands on her stomach. Tears sprang to her eyes. Just then, footsteps paused at the door. The principal stood there. He didn't say a word. Instead, he smiled slightly, his expression one of faint surprise. His gaze fixed entirely on her hands. That silence was a blessing, and because it was silent, it was deeper. As autumn approached, the hospital gave her a due date. Jung-ae wrote the date in a small corner of her notebook. Beside it, she simply wrote, "I will name the child." The principal remained silent. After a long pause, he asked carefully, "Do you have a name in mind?" Jung-ae nodded. "I want to include the light of spring, since the child came in the spring." "That's good." He offered no further interpretation to her words. A name sometimes holds the power to sway an entire lifetime. He would not deprive her of that power. The baby was born as winter began. Though it wasn't snowing, the air was solidly frozen. Under the bright, harsh light of the delivery room, the baby's cry erupted. A clear, distinct, almost adult cry. The nurse bundled the child and handed her over. The warmth of skin and body heat washed over her simultaneously. Jung-ae bent her head and kissed the small forehead. The skin, still warm with labor's sweat, was surprisingly soft. "Congratulations," the principal whispered from the hospital room door. Jung-ae held the baby and looked up. "Let's raise her together." It was not a request. It was a declaration, an offer of alliance. He slowly nodded. Together. The principal handled the birth registration. His name was recorded in the father's section. The seal he used held a slight smudge of old ink. His hand trembled slightly as he pressed the stamp. Whether it was fear or the lingering warmth of relief, he did not say. Jung-ae held the child and watched the scene. The sound of the seal hitting the paper was short and definite, thud. That single sound connected the child's life to society. At night, the baby often cried. The winter night air seemed to seek out the smallest gaps. Even beneath a thin blanket. Jung-ae walked slowly through the kitchen, holding the baby. Each time, the street lamp outside the kitchen window faintly grazed the baby's cheek. The tiny shadow moved from forehead to cheek, cheek to mouth. Jung-ae loved even that shadow. Occasionally, the doorknob of the main door trembled slightly. It was the principal, bracing his hand against it. His room was the small one across the living room. And the door was often left half open. When the baby cried, he would heat water, and sometimes, in the pre-dawn hours, he would buy fresh milk, while the steam from the sterilized bottled water rose. The two did not look at each other's faces. Even while together, there was a quiet boundary they wished to maintain. That boundary was a wall built not of shame, but of respect. A few months passed, and Jung-ae returned to school. Her maternity leave had been brief. The child was entrusted to a neighbor during the day. The neighbor often said, "The baby is so gentle." Jung-ae could not accurately measure the ratio of gratitude to resentment contained in those words. But in the evening, the baby would laugh louder. Her mother's scent, her mother's voice, her mother's arms. In that order, the child's tension would release. The principal maintained his subtle distance. He handled the administrative burdens. And Jung-ae's classroom was always the first to be warmed. One summer day, after a brief, sharp shower, the sunlight filled the puddles in the schoolyard with gold. Jung-ae sat on the windowsill at the back of the classroom, her elbow resting on the frame, looking at a photo of her child. A small, black and white print found at the photo lab. The child looked straight into the camera. Her eyes were unexpectedly deep. Jung-ae slipped the photo into the back of her diary. The diary remained closed. Even when closed, the scent of ink and the breath of old paper mingled within it. There are some words that must remain closed. Those words wait for a day to be opened. There are sentences that only complete themselves when revealed. That evening, she wrote a letter. The recipient line was left blank. She did not seal the envelope. She simply folded it and tucked it somewhere in the diary, near the pages, where the word "spring" appeared often. Time passed like that, shifting between quiet resolve and small evasions, between awakened love and newly founded responsibility. As the school's 4 seasons changed twice, Jung-ae watched both the speed at which her child grew, and the speed at which the color of spring in her heart faded. Fading did not mean disappearing. When the color softens, the form sharpens. She learned that slowly. And then, one day, accidentally opening a corner of the newspaper's social section, she saw an old name. Janae. Munhwa Center. Do-yun. A single line of an address. She traced the line with her finger. Then clipped the small piece of paper and taped it to the very back of her diary. That night, she stood before the mailbox for a long time, but ultimately did not drop the envelope in. The envelope returned to the diary. Beneath the closed cover, words piled up like the scales of time. Jung-ae finally understood. Life was not about forgetting someone, but about living with someone else while embracing the memory of another. And the adult way was to change the order of words and adjust the temperature of actions, so that her embrace would not become a sin. With the adult way, she loved her child, the school, and the principal until the end. And she never abandoned her spring. Chapter 3. The Autumn Letter. The beginning of the secret. Autumn was always a difficult season for Jung-ae. The speed at which the school trees changed color felt unusually quick. One day they were green, the next, already dyed crimson. Change always arrived without warning, and her emotions were no different. That autumn, the year her child passed her first birthday and began to walk, Jung-ae reopened her diary. The cover was still wrapped in red cloth, the threads unraveling slightly at one end. As she opened the diary, the scent of old ink rose. She flipped through the pages with her fingertip. Sentences filled with Do-yun's name. The memory of the day he left. The day she accepted the principal's proposal amidst the rain. Everything was there. Only the time was different. The emotion remained unchanged. She picked up her pen. That person's child has grown. The child looks at me with eyes that resemble your smile. The child doesn't ask for reasons. There are many things in the world they don't need to know yet. She wrote briefly and stopped. She thought, should I deliver this letter someday? Just then, footsteps sounded outside the door. The principal entered. You have the light on late. Jung-ae quickly covered the diary. I had some things to organize. Is the baby making it difficult for you lately? His voice was still quiet, the tone devoid of emotional layers. I'm all right. They walk now, so they cry less. He smiled. A brief silence passed. The principal glanced at the wall clock. Sometimes I think, you seem like someone who will remain with this school. For a long time, teacher. Jung-ae couldn't fully grasp the meaning of his words. After he left, she placed her hand over the closed diary. Beneath her palm, a letter lay thinly pressed. The address column read, 47 to 12, Munhwa Center, Jeonnae-si, Jongnam. It was the address Do-hyun had used when sending letters. After his military return, she slowly traced the address with her fingertip. He wouldn't be there now. She thought so, yet strangely, she couldn't fall asleep that entire night. A few days later, Do-hyun's former military comrade visited the school. He wore a worn military uniform, his face tanned by the sun. Jung-ae met him outside the faculty room. Do you happen to have any news of Mr. Do-hyun? He hesitated momentarily. 3 years ago, he was discharged due to an accident during an operation. I heard he's working at a local cultural center now. At that one sentence, Jung-ae's time stopped. He was alive. That single fact made the air different. She dropped the book she was holding. Are you all right? At his question, she managed a slight nod. Please don't tell him anything about me. I won't. He offered a polite farewell and left. As his back disappeared from view, Jung-ae, hands trembling on her lap, pulled out the diary. If he is alive, then I, too, must be alive. She wrote that. That night, Jung-ae wrote a new letter. She took out the old, folded letter from the red diary and attached a new sheet of paper to the back. If the first sheet was the record of lost love, the second was the confession of the survivor. If you ever receive this letter, you don't have to forgive me. After you left, I carried your child. And I raised that child under a different name. This is no one's fault, and no one's victory. It was simply a decision made to survive. She paused, lifting her pen. Outside the window, an early autumn wind rustled, scattering dry leaves. She folded the envelope and placed it back into the diary. This might be my last record. Jung-ae thought so, and quietly extinguished the light. A few days later, Jung-ae did not come to school. They assumed she had caught a cold. But she had been hospitalized with severe anemia. The principal visited her hospital room. You are very weak, teacher. I'm all right. Just a little tired. Her face was pale, but her eyes were strangely calm. The principal glanced at the diary resting on the bedside table. The red-wrapped cover looked like an old prayer book. He placed his hand on it for a moment, then, without a word, withdrew it. Teacher, what is this? It's just records. Records that no one needs to see. She smiled softly. Though, someone might read them someday. That night, Jung-ae refused to be discharged. I'll stay one more night. The nurse was puzzled but allowed it. Jung-ae wrote in her diary throughout the night. Love, like an old diary, gains weight the more you cover it. I've lived carrying that weight. Now, perhaps I can set it down." And she wrote the final sentence. "If my daughter ever finds this diary, please deliver this letter to that person in Janae." She set down her pen. Outside the window, moonlight shone faintly, and the wind gently swayed the curtain. She placed the diary on the bedside table and closed her eyes. Her breathing gradually became quiet. Her last night passed that way. Chapter 4. Delivering the Letter. Reunion Across Time. The years flowed quietly. The fields outside the window had turned golden and frozen white, repeating the cycle many times. When her daughter, Soo-jin, turned 20, Jung-ae was gone. Her room still held the red-wrapped diary, and covering it was a single faded black and white photograph. Soo-jin only knew the young man in the photo, who wore a neat military uniform and had a warm smile, as an old student of a distant relative. Her mother always placed that photo over the closed diary. The first time she opened the diary was the day she sorted through her mother's belongings. It was late autumn, the sky hung low, and leaves were falling silently outside the window. A key, tucked deep inside the desk drawer, clicked faintly as Soo-jin unbound the red cloth. From within the worn cloth, an aged scent of ink rose. And within that scent, there was a name she had never once heard, Do-yeon. Soo-jin slowly read the script. The handwriting was neat, yet a strained strength was felt in every stroke. "He is the most solid person I have ever met. But the world could not accept that solidity. I carried a child in the void he left. That child is you." Her fingertips were numb. It felt as if every memory she held was being overturned. She realized only now that the principal, the man her mother always called a kind person, and the one she believed to be her father, was not the one who started the love, but the one who stood guard over its end. Tears streamed down. Soo-jin closed the diary, then opened it again. Tucked into the end page was an envelope. Only 3 Korean characters were written on the cover. Janae Do-yeon. Her mother's final sentence was written beneath the envelope. "Please deliver this letter to that person in Janae." Soo-jin read the sentence again and again. Her hands trembled, and her chest tightened. She sat still for a long time. Outside, she heard the sound of a fallen leaf tapping against the window pane. She stood up. The decision was made slowly, but once made, it was unwavering. That evening, she placed the letter in her bag and booked a bus ticket from Seoul to Janae. The bus to Janae traveled slowly south. As the scenery outside the window changed, the landscape in Soo-jin's heart slowly transformed too. She wondered what kind of wind blew across the sea, where her mother had spent her youth. She rested her head against the window, trying to recall the face her mother must have yearned for. But no matter how hard she tried, the face would not form. Instead, only her mother's voice faintly lingered in her ear. Sincerity lasts longer than time. The words felt strangely like comfort. Do-yeon's address remained 47-12, Munhwa-dong. When the bus arrived at the terminal, the sky was ablaze with sunset. Soo-jin walked slowly. Old signboards by the road. Windows of aged concrete buildings, trot music playing somewhere. Everything was unfamiliar, yet strangely familiar at the same time. It felt as if her mother's memories were hidden in the city's air. The Munhwa-dong alley was surprisingly narrow. Following the number, a gray gate appeared. 47-12. Soo Jin paused briefly before the gate. The letter in her hand suddenly felt heavy. She took a breath and knocked. Ding dong, a small bell rang. After a long silence, the aged door opened. A white-haired elder slowly revealed his face. "Whom are you looking for?" His voice was low and calm. Soo Jin held out the envelope with both hands. "Do you know this person? My mother insisted that I deliver this to you before she passed." The elder looked at the envelope in her hands. He was silent for a long moment. His gaze stopped at the name on the envelope, Du-yun. The moment he saw the name, his hand trembled slightly. "Come in." The elder's voice resonated low. The small main room was filled with the scent of old books and wood. On the wall hung a photograph of a seaside landscape. And a few military medals, losing their luster, sat on the bookshelf. Du-yun sat in a chair. Touching the envelope with his fingertips, he spoke. "This handwriting. It's Jung A's. That person's hand." His voice shook very slightly. "Is she all right?" Soo Jin hesitated, then lowered her head. "My mother. She passed away." The moment the words fell, the air in the room grew heavier. Du-yun covered his face with both hands. He said nothing. His shoulders slowly shook. He let out a long sigh. "I failed to protect her. That is the greatest sin of my life." He opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of neat stationery. The writing was old but still elegant. He began to read the letter with trembling hands. "Du-yun, if you receive this letter, I might already have departed to a place of yearning. After you left, I carried your child. That child has your eyes. And whenever she laughs, your voice overlaps with hers. I named that child Soo Jin, meaning the light of spring. Now, that child will be seeking you out. Please do not be too surprised. The years have indeed traveled a long way to return. Please forgive that person, the man she married, and please, forgive me too." Du-yun lowered the letter, his hands shaking. His eyes were moist. "Soo Jin, you say?" He quietly looked at her. In his gaze, there was profound regret more than surprise. "It is true. From the day I left your mother, my time stopped. She remembered me until the very end." His voice trembled, and that tremor resonated through the air of the room. Soo Jin closed her eyes. "My mother left this behind last." She held out the diary. The red-wrapped diary, its light faded by the weight of time. Du-yun touched the cloth cover with his fingertips and slowly unbound it. On the first page, it was written, "Love remains even when time passes. Let us not hate that person. Our spring was brief, but it was sincere." Du-yun read the sentence, then closed his eyes. His finger trembled slightly. He was a man who had not cried for many years. But on that day, he silently wept. His tears flowed quietly, like belated spring rain. Chapter 5. Spring Returns. Forgiveness and the Legacy. After that day, Soo Jin remained in the small village of Janae. Du-yun spoke little for the first few days. He sat at the table, pouring tea, occasionally asking short questions. "Seoul must still be bustling, I suppose? Was your mother a woman of few words?" Soo Jin answered calmly. "She didn't laugh often, but she was always kind." The conversation was like the lingering scent of sentences. The two had never exchanged long ago. Du-yun swept the yard every morning. Dry leaves rustled at the end of his old broom. His movements were slow and deliberate. Soo-jin watched him from the porch, and suddenly said, "That's my job to do, isn't it?" He slowly smiled, his hand never stopping. "It's not your age for that yet. Young people should look at the wind. I'm at the age where I only chase the wind." His words were humorous, yet somehow poignant. She smiled. Within that smile, the awkwardness of their first meeting had almost vanished. A few days later, Do-yeon called Soo-jin into the small room. Against one wall were dusty bookshelves and an old wooden drawer chest. He reached deep inside and pulled out a thick envelope. "These are the things I only learned about after your mother left." He opened the envelope and spread the contents. Several yellowed photographs, an old handkerchief, and a bundle of military letters. The first photograph showed the young Jung-ae by a classroom window, smiling. Do-yeon stared at the photo for a long time before saying, "That day, she gave me a letter to receive it when I returned. But I never returned. Right after reporting back, I was rushed to the hospital with an injury. And in the meantime, I heard she was already married." He paused, his lips firmly sealed. "I thought that was the end of it. But looking at it now, that was only the beginning." Soo-jin quietly listened to his words. "Father." She called him carefully. Do-yeon lifted his head. "May you call me that?" His eyes trembled. He couldn't answer at first. After a long moment, he said in a shaking voice, "Yes. I have waited for that word for 20 years." Soo-jin's eyes welled up. Do-yeon reached out his hand. His hand was rough, yet warm. "If your mother forgave me at the end, I must now forgive myself. That is the task of those who are late." That night, Soo-jin opened the diary in her room. The last page read, "Spring in Jeonnae always comes late. But once it comes, it stays long. My love was the same. If you read this, pass the spring to that person. And begin your own spring yourself." She closed her eyes, reading the sentence. It was as if her mother's voice was echoing in her ear. Begin your own spring yourself. The next morning, Soo-jin went out to the yard. Sunlight fell warmly, and the wind was gentle. Do-yeon was sitting on the porch. He held a small potted plant. "This is the plum blossom tree your mother loved. I planted it the year after she left. Every spring, 1 or 2 flowers bloomed. But this year..." He stopped talking. The plum blossoms before their eyes were unusually white and clear. "This year, 10 blossoms have already bloomed." His voice was low, but a peace deeper than tears lay within it. Soo-jin approached and sat beside him. "It seems mother has returned." He nodded. "Yes. Spring returns that way. Not through a person, but through the heart." They talked until the afternoon. Do-yeon spoke of Jung-ae's youth, and Soo-jin spoke of Jung-ae as a mother. Their separate memories filled the gaps in each other's knowledge. The void Jung-ae had left was slowly filled through their conversation. A few days later, Soo-jin decided to return to Seoul. Do-yeon saw her off from the yard. In his hand was a small box. "This is your mother's diary. It is yours now." Soo-jin took the box, holding it tightly with both hands. "I will come back when spring returns." He smiled. "More plum blossoms will be blooming then." Through the bus window, the sea of Jeonnae receded. Sunlight shattered, and the wind gently stirred. Soo-jin placed the diary on her lap. The light penetrated the red cloth, making it gleam. She whispered slowly, "Mom, spring has arrived." As the bus turned a corner and disappeared, Du-Yun stood alone in the yard. Plum blossom petals fluttered in the wind and fell at his feet. He looked up at the sky. His lips trembled faintly, murmuring something. "Jung-ae, thank you." Tears welled up in his eyes. But this time, it was not the sorrow of loss, but tears mixed with the scent of spring. Chapter 6. The end of the letter, the beginning of spring. A week had passed since her return to Seoul. But Soo-jin's heart still lingered by the sea in Jeonnae. The few days spent with Du-Yun felt like a process of reattaching lost time. Everything was new, yet somehow ancient. She placed her mother's diary on her desk every night, and sat before it, reading quietly. The pages, already worn, held the texture of emotion in every line. Tears were evident where the ink had blurred, and resolve was palpable where the script was pressed hard. Soo-jin read those words, confronting for the first time the entire life of a woman she never truly knew. Her mother was not merely a teacher, nor just a mother. She was a woman who had overcome her era. A person who had remained most human in the face of love. That night, Soo-jin closed the final page of the diary and slowly whispered, "Mother. You didn't run away. You bravely remained to live, to protect me." She opened her desk drawer. Inside lay the small wooden box Du-Yun had given her. Inside the box was a handwritten letter from Du-Yun. The envelope cover read simply, "To Jung-ae, and to Soo-jin." Soo-jin felt her hands trembling as she unfolded the letter. "Jung-ae, even after you left, I lived by remembering the spring of that year every day. The smile you left with me was my last hope. But I kept that hope hidden for a long time. I never knew that time would bring back your child, our flesh and blood. Soo-jin, the day you stood before me, I felt the world pause. Your face carried the spring of your mother. Now I want to dedicate the rest of my life to guarding that spring. Your mother was always sincere. And that sincerity ultimately brought you back to me. If you read this letter, do not hate me, and be proud of your mother." Soo-jin held the letter, remaining silent for a long time. Tears flowed slowly. The tears felt not like pain, but like the releasing of long-held chains of time. She opened the window that night. Beyond the city lights, spring rain was falling. Within the sound of the rain, she felt as if she heard her mother's voice and her father's voice, speaking together. Love remains long. That spring is now yours. She sat by the window, gently tracing the red cloth of the diary cover with her fingertip. The texture of the cloth was soft. Inside it lay the lives of 3 people, stacked one upon the other. Like the chapters of a book. It was a miracle crafted by time. A few months later, Soo-jin returned to Jeonnae. Du-Yun had grown frail in the meantime. The spring plum blossoms had passed their peak, their petals scattering in the wind. She sat before him on the porch. "Father, spring is already passing." Du-Yun smiled. "I still have spring left within me. Because you are here." He slowly raised his hand and stroked her hair. "Only after meeting you did time finally forgive me." That evening, Du-Yun quietly closed his eyes. His breathing was tranquil, and his expression was peaceful. As always, the red-covered diary lay beside him. He had departed, but this time, no one wept. The warmth of spring remained on his face. After the funeral, Soo Jin stayed briefly in Do-yeon's house. Outside the window, new plum branches were budding. She placed the diary and the letter in the small wooden box, and laid a clean sheet of paper on top of it, and slowly wrote, "Mother, Father, I will now carry on the spring you left behind. Your love did not end. It will bloom again within my time." She set down the pen and smiled. There was no day without spring, she thought. Only, each person's spring sometimes arrives late. Opening the window, warm sunlight streamed in. The scent of plum blossoms filled the room. Soo Jin closed her eyes and recalled the single sentence her mother had left behind. Spring in Janae comes late. But once it comes, it stays long. Chapter 7. The Lingering Spring, the Continuing Story. The spring had passed just like that, once more. Time still flowed, but for Soo Jin, the meaning of the seasons had changed. In her life, spring was not merely a season. It was the time when the words left by those who departed, and the hearts imbued within those words, bloomed again. After Do-yeon's funeral, Soo Jin sorted through his house, encountering new discoveries. A small box found deep inside an old drawer. Within it were letters Do-yeon had written to Jung-ae, but ultimately couldn't bring himself to mail. Most of the letters were half-written and abruptly stopped. The handwriting was neat, but hesitation clung to the end of every sentence. In one of them, it was written, "Jung-ae, I still remember the spring that paused at your fingertips. Your smile, the sight of you holding the white chalk, keeps surfacing in my mind. More than war, more than honor, what I lost was you. Please, if that child grows up to see the world with eyes that resemble mine, perhaps my sin will be slightly washed away then." Soo Jin carefully refolded the letters. In that moment, she felt a single life being completed between her mother's diary and Do-yeon's letters. Their love had not ended. Their spring had ultimately reached her. Before leaving Do-yeon's house, she erected a small marker under the plum tree. Upon it, she inscribed a single short sentence. "Love, though late, eventually arrives." That sentence was their story, and the message she wanted to convey to the rest of her life. On the day she left Janae, a soft morning mist covered the seaside. Soo Jin caught the last fallen petal from the plum tree in her palm. The petal rested quietly on her hand. In that moment, she felt all sorrow transforming into a single light. "Now I truly let you go," she whispered. "I will continue to make your spring bloom within my own heart." Soo Jin returned to Seoul and began working at a small literary museum. It was a quiet space, converted from an old school building. The smell of aged manuscripts and ink permeated the walls. Every morning, Soo Jin taught writing to young students. Her mother's penmanship remained in her fingertips, and her father's warmth lingered in her voice. Sometimes, students would ask, "Teacher, when is the best time to write?" Soo Jin would smile and reply, "When you miss someone. The deeper the longing, the truer the writing." Her words carried the story of three people who traveled 20 years to return. Jung-ae's longing, Do-yeon's regret, and her own forgiveness. All those emotions connected into a single sentence. That afternoon, Soo Jin placed a small box in the donation of artifacts corner of the museum. Inside were the diary wrapped in red cloth, Do-yeon's letters, and the black and white photograph. She wrote in the guest book, This diary holds the spring of two people. Once, it was a love that had to be hidden. But now, it has become the courage to be revealed to the world. And I live as the proof of that love. As she wrote the sentence, Soo Jin was no longer bound by the shadows of the past. Born from her mother's spring. Having traversed her father's spring, she was now writing her own spring. Outside the window, cherry blossoms fluttered. Pink petals grazed the glass and fell. She slightly opened the window. The wind carried the scent of the diary and gently swayed the white curtains. She spoke in a low voice, "Mother, Father. Are you well? Now, it is my turn." That night, after turning off the museum lights, Soo Jin looked up at the sky. A single star shone clearly. Its light felt like the gaze of both her parents. She smiled. Now I understand. Love doesn't end. It becomes someone's story and continues. Tears welled up in her eyes. But this time, she did not weep. The tears were not of sadness, but of warm confession. Chapter 8. Spring Returns. Epilogue. Several years had passed. The plum blossoms in Janae still bloomed white every spring. And in that village, in the small house, at the foot of the hill, strangers now lived. But the small marker beneath the plum tree in the corner of the yard remained. Its inscription true to the original words. Love, though late, eventually arrives. The Literary Museum in Seoul was quiet today, too. In one corner of the exhibition hall, the Jong-ae and Do-yeon's diary section held the red-wrapped diary. Glowing with the light of time inside a glass case, an elderly man stood before it. His white hair neatly combed, his hands clasped as he gazed at the diary. His name was Mr. Park, the last colleague who had taught with Jong-ae. He trembled slightly as he murmured, "Jong-ae, your story finally remains in the world." He smiled, and closed his eyes for a moment. The memory of the young teacher, leaving her penmanship across the blackboard, surfaced in his mind. Time had taken much, but he knew now. True love is not a record, but a trace left by the heart. That afternoon, a group of middle school students came to visit the museum. The children stopped before the diary case. And one of them said, "Is this real? It's like a movie." Soo Jin smiled and replied, "Yes, it was truer than any movie." Her voice was calm but warm. A child asked, "Then where are they now?" Soo Jin looked up at the sky for a moment. "They must be where the plum blossoms bloom," she answered, turning her gaze toward the window. The sunlight was suddenly dazzling. Dust particles slowly floated in the light. It was as if the particles of time were dancing. After turning off the museum lights for the evening, Soo Jin stood before the diary one last time. The red cloth behind the glass was still vibrant. She lightly tapped the glass with her fingertip. "Mother, Father, are you well? My part is done now. Your story has ended, but your love continues to grow inside me." She picked up her bag and walked out. The sky was crimson with twilight. The sunset reflecting off the glass of the city buildings made it look as if spring were blooming in every window. She smiled softly. The twilight was like her mother's smile. And the distant scent of plum blossoms felt like her father's warm breath. That night, Soo Jin returned home and opened a new diary on her desk. The cover was a clean notebook wrapped in white cloth. On the first page, she wrote, "Today, I rewrite Mother and Father's spring. That spring did not end. hoped it restarts as my story. The tip of her pen grazed the paper. Just then, a soft wind blew outside the window. A single plum blossom petal flew in through the slightly opened window and landed on her diary. Su Jin slowly covered the petal with her hand. Her fingertip trembled warmly. "Spring has returned, mother." She smiled. "This spring, I will write it myself."